There are some fantastic records available all over the world, really, on the internet and in archives. I want to tell a story about a family I worked on. It was the Moyle family from Utah. And when I met them in 1976, they had been hiring David Gardner and Frank Smith, who wrote the textbooks that I used in my college studies of genealogy. They were the best English genealogists probably in the world. And they had worked for this family for over 20 years. And they'd gone from village to village to literally hundreds of parishes in England, just walking or driving and visiting the churches. Now most records are available in archives and libraries, but back then when I started this, you often had to go to the churches. Well, I went to the Somerset Record Office in Taunton, Somerset, and I was hoping to work on this family of Thomas Cannon. He was an ancestor born about 1690, and the parish registers only go back to 1754 in Babcarry, the parish where he was from. So, and the wills for Somerset were all destroyed in the war, so we thought there really are no records that can extend this family further. I went to the record office and asked them for records on Babcarry, and they said, we don't really have anything, but they brought me one page, one sheet of paper. It was a handwritten Babcarry parish registers, and it started in the 1690s, I think, and all it had was an entry for Eleanor Beaton and her parents and her siblings. This was Thomas Cannon's wife. So we found her birth, her parents, and actually her grandparents on this single sheet of paper. The archives still say the records started in 1754, but we got back another 60 years. Then I was looking for records on the Cannons. So I was searching our catalog and found a record that said John Cannon's Memoirs. It was written by a minister named John Cannon. It's an 800-page handwritten journal that he kept. He went to Oxford University and got his Doctor of Divinity degree there. In England and in Europe, basically, the only people who were educated were the ministers, because they did go to Cambridge and Oxford and get divinity degrees, doctor. So this doctor, John Cannon, they brought me this book. It was about this thick, 800 pages, handwritten, leather-bound, beautiful book. And I thought, what on earth is this? And as I got in, I saw that he was a minister, and he just wrote about his studies at the university. He wrote about his parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. He wrote about 5 generations back, everything he remembered. He told about his ancestor John Cannon, who came from County Kent, which is on the other side, the west coast of England, the east coast of England, and Somerset is on the west coast. So for some reason, they traveled this long distance and settled there, and he wrote in great detail about his great-grandparents and all their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And as I went through it, there were, he'd compiled these family trees. John Cannon and Mary Isles, these were his great-grandparents. And then it has their children. Another family tree listing the parents and 23 children that they had, most of them whom died in infancy, and then their grandchildren and what he knew. Fantastic record. He drew a self-portrait, beautiful in the original. It was hard to copy, but so I was so excited to find this, and I thought, I wonder if these are related. And as I went through it and I found that this Thomas Cannon we were looking for was the first cousin of this Reverend John Cannon. And so he talked about the family. One of them, he said, his ancestor, John Cannon, who is Reverend John Cannon's ancestor, as well as our ancestor, Thomas. John Cannon was a butcher, and his wife, they both died of smallpox and left 5 orphans. And he talks about each member of the family. He says, the son John was 12 years of age, and by an unlucky accident fell from a cherry tree, broke his leg. It became gangrenous, and the doctors had to amputate his leg, and he died immediately when the leg was amputated. As he's writing these stories, he intersperses the scriptures. He quotes Psalm 37:29, "The righteous shall inherit the land and dwell therein forever." His grandfather married, and he says, thrived greatly and lived to have 23 children, most of whom died in infancy. He was buried in 1687. He talks about their personality traits. He tells about the death of his grandfather, which he witnessed. And then Mary, his wife, his grandmother, was very charitable to all people, pious to God, and sober to all in their dealings and conversations. She was a fat, jolly woman. She and her husband lived a very discontent life, and she, dying, left him a widower. It was said his morose temper hastened her death. And then her brother, William, he was a very comely, pleasant, and well-set man, an excellent singer and butcher by trade. He fell in love with one Joan Walter. She was a haughty, clamorous woman, withal very expensive and costly in her apparel. Anyway, he goes on and on, talking about each of these individuals. And then he talks about his cousin, Thomas Cannon, who is our client's ancestor. He was the youngest of all his brethren. He was a very stout, big man, and few excelled him in strength. A butcher, also had a good education, but an infirmity hindered his pronunciation, which was lisping. He feared to travel by night, especially through churchyards, and for company's sake, he took this cousin, Reverend John, with him to protect him from his fears. He married Joan Horwood, who had a brother killed by lightning. She, like her sister-in-law before, was proud and a great dissembler, very talkative, yet they lived loving together. Thomas, their eldest son, a wild, profligated, debauched young man, although he had a good and fortunate wife, and he tells about all these things that we could never know if it wasn't for this journal. And as we learned about the family, told where they lived and when they lived, we were able to go to the parish registers and extend this pedigree back another 4 generations, adding hundreds of names to the family tree and having this fantastic history.